Jonathan Boyd, fascinating man. He's a trained chef, but he had to remove himself from the life. It was very long hours, 80 to 90 hours a week, 14-hour days. Was making great money, but he was not happy. We see this often. You know, we're in a career and we're making really good money, but we're depressed, and we're able to afford things, but we really can't enjoy them because we're away from our family. And he did a very bold thing. He moved completely to a different job, still similar in the same profession, but he moved to a different job. He has a farm now with his family in near Jackson, Mississippi. We talk a lot about, I'm always fascinated with chefs and what they do. But now he's decided to completely take it over, go to this new job, which is really, really, really interesting. And he does a podcast now with his brother, which is Bodacious Life, and he follows the 5 Fs. It's really interesting the way him and his brother kind of bring it all together, and faith, finance, family, fun, and freedom are kind of his core values. I always thought, by the way, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. But it's really interesting what his perspective is on it, and I really enjoyed this conversation with Jonathan Boyd. I think you will as well. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission: how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family, in their passion, in their careers, and how it helped them. Our podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Jonathan Boyd, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. So, why leave the what I consider one of the greatest arts, one of the greatest careers, one of the greatest arts in the world, being a chef? Why? How has it got you sour?
So, to get up to the the upper echelon of chefdom, there's a lot of years of working in the trenches and slogging it through. And at first, that's you have this desire, this passion, of course, to do something that's really great. And then obviously there's the other side of it where you're like, hey, I really want this money. This money piece of the puzzle is very important as well. And I have 6 kids, and I had really worked myself up to a figure job. The problem is I thought that by having this money and having this level of success that I would be happy. Well, I found out that there's just really just a bunch of emptiness up there at the top.
Hmm.
That yes, money is great, and yes, money does solve a lot of problems, but it doesn't necessarily make you feel good inside. So I've been on a 8th month quest to, I guess, right my wrongs a little bit in my personal life. And yeah, I left my fancy schmancy restaurant, and I took on a corporate role with a sales company. And from there, I've been able to. It was a big pay cut, about $15,000 pay cut.
Wow.
But now I have time for my family. I've just been able to enjoy podcasting and do all the things that I like to do. And I always tell people that yes, money is super important and it's worth, goes a long way. However, there is one currency, one resource that you can never purchase more of, and that's time. You
Hmm.
only have a finite amount, and it doesn't matter if you're Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Jonathan Boyd. We've got a finite amount of time left on this planet, and I feel like I was wasting it.
And the time commitment was the biggest issue, right? You were working a lot of hours?
Was 80 plus hours a week. I would normally
Wow.
get there between 5 and 6 a.m. Make sure our executive lounge and all those things that go on uh, on the top side of our property was hitting on all four cylinders. And then I'd come downstairs, make sure that the breakfast and all that's going. And normally, almost every day, I had catering events going on as well. And especially during the middle of COVID, I didn't have a whole lot of team. What used to be a team of 25 cooks was down to about 8. So me as the chef, I had to take on a lot of that responsibility. So I'd be there at about 8 in the morning. And then we just kind of roll in. We had to feed 150 employees 3 times a day in our employee dining room. And before you knew it, I mean, it was 9, 10 o'clock at night. You roll right into dinner service and, you're either putting out a banquet or you're up on the line. And, when the chef's not around, the team will play. So it's
Hmm.
important for the chef to kind of be there a little bit because it's my name on the door. So when things weren't right, I know at the end of the day it's going to look bad on me. So I was very particular about staying through the dinner rush and maybe another chef could walk away and not do that. I can't do it. It's my name on the line. I want it to be right. I want to be the leader, the tip of the spear. So I would typically hang out for that.
Now, Jonathan, this wasn't 7 days a week, right?
It was for I would say I probably did 10 to 15 weeks that were like that. Most of my weeks were about 6, and every once in a while we'd kind of teeter into a little bit of an off season, like the back end of like Memorial Day weekend here in Jackson, Mississippi is just a dead week. College is out of town. No one really travels for Jackson for tourism. So that's kind of a little bit of a dead period. And then the weddings start about 2 or 3 weeks later. And then
Hmm.
it just kind of starts escalating back up.
Couple of chef questions before we move into the podcast and things that
Yeah.
you're doing now, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
I mean, I love being a hobbyist cook, right? I mean,
Okay.
uh, sugar in marinara.
Oh, jeez. Um, I don't put sugar in my tomato sauces.
Look at that.
One, I
Awesome.
don't know if you've ever had a tomato from Crystal Springs, Mississippi,
I have
but
not.
we're actually known for our area to have really sweet tomatoes because of our soil content.
Hmm.
I've never heard of that thing, but coming growing tomatoes here, I have really sweet tomatoes, and we probably grow about 200 to 300 pounds a year off of because I live on here on a
On a
farm as
farm.
well.
Yeah.
So I'm able to kind of grow my own tomato sauce, and we have canned tomato sauces for days. But no, I'm simple: celery, onion, carrots, some kind of smoked pork items. And sometimes for us here in the South, we don't always have like pancetta, but we do have like smoked hog jowls. So
Hmm.
I'll crisp that up in there, and then all of that gets blended together with a little bit of basil, a little oregano, and a little bit of thyme, and maybe a little pinch of salt and pepper, depending on what I got going on for that sauce.
Onion, garlic?
So mirepoix, celery, onion, carrot,
Ah.
and then I add garlic for sure. And then the key is that a lot of people miss on this, and American cuisine and Americans in general, we're very lazy about how we do spices, and
Hmm.
I'm very guilty of it. I had some time to train with a little lady at our church who was Indian. And so she's like, no, 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 you got to make sure you sweat all the spices and
Mm.
everything in that oil before you add all your liquids. We have a very big tendency to add everything at the end and feel like we're going to be able to taste ample amount.
Hmm.
So we actually end up overshooting the amount of time and dried herbs that we need. If we would, even our fresh herbs, if we would saute them in the beginning in our olive oil, we'll be able to add more flavor into that tomato sauce or whatever that you're working on.
Wow. So I'm in the Northeast, and I only use San Marzano tomatoes, so I got to bring those in.
Yeah.
We don't the tomatoes here aren't necessarily that sweet, but they're generally acidic, and so the carrot, these kinds of things kind of cut that.
Right. they'll definitely, because you're adding when you sweat it in the pan, I actually put a little bit of caramelization on it.
Ah.
So when I do that, I'm actually cooking the sugars inside of those vegetables, and that's adding sweetness as well. And there's also a tomato brand out there. It's kind of hard to find, but you can find them in like specifically Italian retail stores. A brand that you'll see called Piancone or Piancone Epicurio. Those are Italian tomatoes that are from the southern part of Italy. So you can kind of get some of, if you can't ever find those San Marzanos, sometimes you can find those up there, especially in the Northeast. That's where that brand is from.
Hmm. And so I've been told that you make the best steak possible. You grill it.
I take a lot of passion in my steak. I
Yeah.
get really geeky about it. Again, on my farm, I created our farm here with along with my wife and my kids, just so I can have, I feel like, the best ingredients. And in that passion, we now have cows out on our farm. So we've got a certified Hereford, which I'm really excited about. I sell a
Wow.
lot of certified Hereford. Of course, we have a Brahma cow. Brahma cows, they're the ones that has like the big old humps on their backs.
Huh.
What's great about them, they're technically from Africa, but they do really well in Mississippi. Mississippi's hot, muggy. It's like Central Africa. There's no
Mm.
breeze here. It's like Satan's armpit hot out here.
Ooh.
It's nuts. It's really hot here. So to have an animal like that that's not going to be phased by it's great. And then we have an Angus cow out there as well. So we're kind of dabbling with it a
Hmm.
little bit, and I got really down the rabbit hole of how am I going to make the best steak? It's a 3-year investment, mind you, whenever you get a
Wow.
cow. People don't realize that it's 3 years. You got to
Is it
hold on to this
really?
cow and grow it and, treat it right, make sure it's got the right pasture. And, we're going to finish it on grain. Our first one will go to butcher this winter, but I love my steaks. I can't be a vegan. Shout out to everyone who can. I have appreciation for you, but I am a meat eater.
Yeah, so am I. So am I. I just I try to limit my red meat, but I tell you, I love hamburgers. I love steak. I love, I cook a lot of chicken. But so what's the common mistake people make when cooking steaks at home?
They're either kind of a couple things. One, they don't understand the branding and quality that goes behind steaks. You need
Hmm.
to make sure that you're getting a quality steak. That's something that we kind of miss out on. We kind of roll into a quick grocery store, but we don't ask questions on, is it choice? Is it certified Hereford or certified Angus? Is it prime? The cheaper that meat, typically you can just go ahead and know that those are going to be the more expensive cuts.
Hmm.
So when you're going into a program and it's not a certified Angus or a certified Hereford, you'll have what's called sometimes they call them like legacy steaks, meaning that could be a bull, that could be or a cow over 30 months old.
Wow.
So you don't know what you're going to get in that steak. So yes, sometimes you might get a cow that is literally 10 days past the 30-month mark, but it's got to be considered into that legacy line. Or you could get a 8-year-old bull that is going to be like chewing on a boot,
Hmm.
and that kind of gets mixed in with that. So go to your local butcher. I always recommend going to a butcher shop over
Mm.
your larger chains. And in that process as well, the next thing is like just knowing how to cook it. Never cook it from ice cold. You're going to want to bring it out at room temperature. Let it season up. Let it sit there. It's going to absorb some of that salt. And then the next part is just understanding that you need to sear that steak,
Right.
whether it's on the grill. I do mine in a cast iron. I love mine done in a cast iron. And then, so how I do mine is because I work for basically one of the prime things that I do now with my new job is I basically showcase and do culinary demos for representing different brands of beef. So that's
Hmm.
something that I do a lot of. And one of the ways that I like to do it is basically I'll have my meat. I'm going to let that sit out for at least 45 minutes. I've got my salt, black pepper. If you got a good steak, you don't need to add blackening seasoning or whatever else to it. Just salt and fresh cracked black pepper. I'm going to let it sit. And then after about 45 minutes, I'm going to get a nice cast iron. I'm going to get that thing all the way to smoke point, meaning that when I add oil, the oil immediately is going to start to smoke.
Hmm.
And I'm going to put my steak in there. I'm going to sear both sides. and then I'm gonna bring the heat down to about halfway, and then that's when I'll add things like fresh thyme, rosemary, any herbs like that, and then a big old chunk of butter or smoke. I have a can of wagyu fat, smoked wagyu fat.
Ooh.
I'll add that in there, and I'll just lather that up on top of that steak. Oh man, it's good. And then, of course, the last bit is letting it rest. Too many people get that steak, they throw it right on the plate, and they start cutting on it, and you can't do that. All the
Mm,
juice will run out. You'll have a dry steak. It'll be chewy. Let the steak sit for about 2 or 3 minutes. You'll thank me. It's
mm.
just a completely different steak when you let the meat rest.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds wonderful. So tell me how you arrived to the point where you're going to leave this high paying job. I mean, you said you have 6 kids, your wife, the farm. Do you talk it over with the family? Is it something that they come to you? Was there a come to Jesus moment? I mean, tell me about that decision making process.
So it kind of came down to multiple things. So I was very depressed and where I was at because I felt like I had worked to a certain point. Yes, I had all of this money. I had basically a 6-digit income at
Mm,
that. And for a chef, that's like the holy grail of thing to brag about,
sure.
and I was going through a funk is I now have all of this stuff, but none of it actually means anything.
Hmm.
I'm missing time with my wife. I'm missing time with my kids. And as crazy as this sounds, I'm literally driving down the road one day and I'm looking at the center median. They have like that metal divider. And I just remember a finite point one morning where I'm just kind of looking at that divider and I'm like, you know what? I can hit that thing at 90 miles an hour and I don't ever have to deal with it again.
Wow.
And it just I honestly, like, there was a certain point where I was dead set on it, and I was there. And then and as really would God has a funny way of, or the universe or whatever you believe, has a funny way of making things happen, and probably about 200 yards before I got to that point, I got a simultaneous text from my wife and my mom, both of them saying, "I love you, and I hope you have a better day."
Wow.
And it's just that was literally the turning point of, okay, I need to figure something out. And I knew just I wasn't in a happy place. I was angry at work. I'm very laid back. If I got to yell at you, I'm not like the Gordon Ramsay type. If I got to
Mm,
yell at you, I obviously didn't hire the right person for the
mm,
job. So I'll help you out. I'll work beside you and I'll train you. I'll give you all of that. But if I got to babysit you and I got to yell at you, then I didn't hire the right person for the
mm,
job. And then I found myself just losing my temper. And within that same week, I had just an absolute, we just had like just a good old fashioned temper tantrum as an
mm,
adult. You're just grabbing things, you're just throwing it. And of course, I'm having this at work, which didn't go over really well either. Not my most proud professional moment, but I was something had happened and I felt disrespected. And that was like the snapping point for
mm,
me. And it was all of these things. And I just came home from my wife that day and I was like, something needs to happen. Something needs to change. I'm not happy. I don't like what I'm doing. I don't like who I am. I don't act like that. And in the process, it was probably another 4 months later before I found my new job
hmm,
because I wanted to find something. I didn't want to just quit and then just try to go over to somewhere else because that doesn't, I've learned that when you job skip, the grass is hardly ever really greener on the other
mm,
side.
mm,
You need to make sure that what you're not leaving just for money. Is just your core values and what you're looking for in your lifestyle. Is it going to really match up with what's the new position that's being offered? And I wanted to make sure that I took my time. And I just happened to, obviously being a chef, you have a tight relationship with the purveyors and things that provide for your restaurant. The purveyor that, was honestly the best to me. Um, and that's the company that I just happened to strike up a conversation. What's funny is a quick side story is that the executive chef who had my position at that hotel went to work for this distributor
hmm,
and then he got promoted. So he was the one who kind of made the calls like, "Hey, we got this position open. Would you be interested in that?" So then it was like a kind of a jump over and I kind of fall leapfrogged over and it really worked out. I think when I sat back, I didn't rush it. I prayed on it. I didn't make a drastic decision right off the bat. I knew exactly what I wanted. how I wanted my new lifestyle to be. And I was willing to kind of hunker down for a minute, make things happen to be able to have a lifestyle that's fruitful and that's meaningful.
Hmm. So your advice for anybody who's listening, who's unhappy in their, in their job is to try to do it the way you did it, I would assume.
I mean, everybody's going to have a different, work situation.
Right.
If you're unhappy with your job and you're miserable, and I was in I wasn't in a good situation. I had a boss there that was just old school, kind of that Gordon Ramsay mentality
Hmm.
of just yell, cuss, chew. He'd text message me at like 3 in the morning, cussing me out. And it's just like over things that honestly have nothing to do with me. I'm the chef. I don't change the syrup bags for sodas. I can't help you. I'm not a food and beverage director. I'm a chef. So it was just kind of like those kinds of things that
Wow.
accumulated up. But overall, I mean, if you're not happy in your position, you definitely need to decide, what is happiness? What does that look like for you? And don't assume that the money is what's going to fix all of your problems.
Hmm.
That's the first thing. And you know, I I think I always kind of blame it on a millennial thing, but it really is a millennial thing. We were taught in a lot of ways that our status is the money that we're going to make, or we're going to reach this certain education and reach this certain amount of dollars. And we're just going to be living life, and we're just going to be riding around in Corvettes, Ferraris, and big houses and living this great life. And you get to the top and you're like, it means nothing.
Hmm.
So find out what that does look like for you and the lifestyle that you want to live. If you want to work during certain hours, I had a friend who was he was looking for a job because he loved fishing. He wanted a fishing podcast, and he wanted to be able to do fishing videos on YouTube. But he needed to be off on weekends to do tournaments, and he wanted to be off in the mornings to where he could go fishing every single morning to create content, to practice, and do what he needed to do. And we were able to find him a great nighttime job at a restaurant,
Hmm.
and basically working in the pastry department.
Hmm.
And so again, he got exactly what he wanted. The company he worked for gets exactly what they wanted in a professional pastry chef, and it all just kind of works out.
How is the restaurant industry business? How is it right now?
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tougher than ever right now.
Really?
The labor pool is absolutely dismal.
Hmm.
And what happened is that, the really good cooks during COVID, basically everybody, half of us got either let go, or especially if you were a good cook with a higher wage, you were the first one to get cut during
Mm.
COVID.
Mhm.
So basically they felt disowned by our industry. So a lot of them went on to work in other industries. So tech, I got quite a few friends that went back to school and picked up like a little 6 month classes on like welding,
Hmm.
and now they are making triple the amount of money being a welder than they would have ever been as a chef. So that's really good for them, but it left a giant hole in our market for us
Right.
as far as our labor goes. And then the other aspect is even once you finally find this magical crew of misfits who are going to work in your kitchen for you, then you've got to be able to source good product.
Mm.
And that's been an issue for a lot of places. Where I work, we finally have gotten back on track, and it just took time, to get the supply chain back on. And there's still some issues that the supply chain's working on, especially getting into this holiday season. This holiday season is not going to be it's going to be interesting
Hmm.
for everybody to get their turkeys and hams and how all that's going to play out. And then the last part is just the money.
Hmm.
People aren't going out in the same way that they were before. And people who didn't adapt and, move into a more digital model, selling more things to go, they tried to stay with a traditional model, are really hurting because a
Hmm.
lot of people move to the digital online ordering, carry outs. The industry is changing.
Yeah.
And if you're not adapting with it, unless you've already got a clientele of just thousands and thousands and thousands of customers, you're really shooting yourself short on what you could be. So it's really tough right now.
I've talked to a couple restaurant owners, and I've heard them say, "We break even on the money. If it wasn't for the bar, we wouldn't make anything."
Oh yes. Bar is it's a double-edged sword. There's more expenses that comes along with that bar when you talk about your insurance.
Mm,
Most cities also make you pay an outrageous like rate just to have the bar because it costs the city money for the police. They just automatically assume that you're going to be a trouble establishment.
right.
It was $20,000 just to sell liquor in my hometown back in Georgia.
Wow.
Yeah, just not you haven't sold a drink yet. You've not had the insurance.
Wow.
You've not bought any bottles of liquor, nothing yet. $20,000 to the city,
Wow.
and you still might not even get approved by the city of
Huh.
council. So you want to talk about, really, putting some faith out there is $20,000 to a city council who might not even approve your bar.
Hmm.
But the typically food, so let's say we're buying a hamburger. When we buy a hamburger, let's say it costs the customer $10. Typically, that means about $3 goes to pay for the actual food. So you think about trying to place when next time you get that, excuse me, get that $10 hamburger. Think about that. That this burger, bun, cheese, French fry, the ketchup, everything that you're going to have included in that meal for that $9.99 is included in basically $3. And for liquor drinks, you're looking at about 18%.
Hmm.
So $1.80 for a $10 drink. And I've paid $10 drinks in the bars or restaurants that I've been at. We've had plenty of drinks that were, 10, 20. And then especially when you get into the wines and whiskeys and stuff like
Sure.
that, you're looking at 30, 40, $50 just for a glass. And then again, it comes down to that's an 18%. So there's just a higher profit margin on those items. So you
Mm.
really got to have that to balance it.
One of my favorite quotes from Prince. Somebody asked Prince, how's the record business? And he famously said, I'm not in the record business. I'm in the music business. So are chefs in the restaurant business or are they in the cooking business?
I think that's the big problem that they have to figure out.
Mm,
I like I miss being on the line. I miss that camaraderie with my chefs. I miss that, it's like a band of misfits that,
yeah.
I had a Vietnamese guy named Jimmy. I had this other guy named Taylor, who's like classic. Exactly. If you could stereotype a hippie, long hair, beard, what's up,
Laid
man?
back. Yeah.
That was my other cook. It's just a bunch of misfits.
Right.
But every day we walked in and we had each other's backs. We'd help prep for each other. And when it came to like our least favorite shift, which of course is brunch, and brunch is just everyone hates brunch.
Why?
Every chef hates brunch. Brunch is that shift on Sunday morning. It just brings in, and this is going to sound the wrong way because I'm a Christian, but Christians come out of church and sometimes they just don't know how to act. And I don't know what it is. You
Really?
know, I don't get it. I don't ever understood the reasoning of being a jerk to a complete stranger.
Too
But
demanding?
typically, say it again.
I'm sorry, demanding? Like what?
Oh, very demanding. The most modifications I could ever imagine for a plate up happen every Sunday. Everybody comes in at one time. They expect their food in 8 minutes or less. And again, I'm a 5 diamond property. I'm making like exquisite plates, and you want this in 8 minutes. You got to cut me some slack. The waffle alone takes 4 minutes. The fried chicken takes 8 minutes. So we gotta, and then when you get 30 waffles at one time and you've only got 2 waffle irons, what are you gonna do when you got,
Wow.
30 chicken and waffles going out at the same time? So brunch is just a very difficult shift.
Hmm.
But I miss being on that camaraderie. But I found out that I really like more being creative and going out of the box and doing new stuff and pushing myself. My
Mm.
job now, I get to do a lot of consulting and I get to meet chefs from all over the Southeast. I control for my company control all of Mississippi and Louisiana for our company, and I get to travel all over my 2 states and help people and design menus and have fun. And sometimes it's a hot dog shop, and then sometimes it's a restaurant that's working on getting its Michelin star.
Wow.
So I really get to be creative and have fun.
Hmm. How much of a bother is it when people ask for the modifications in the food?
It's it really just depends.
Right.
If you come in at the beginning of the shift and there's not a lot of people there, it's really not a big deal. We love to make people happy. All
Right.
chefs love to make people happy. That's why we're into it. There's some sort of narcissism, I think, that plays into it because we like to be told how great our food is. No
Right.
chef is around who doesn't like to have his food, screamed out. It's the best food in the world. There's nothing that makes a chef feel better than a great review on Yelp
Mm.
or TripAdvisor or in a newspaper. It's our favorite thing in the world. But, it's the person who comes in at 7:30 on a Friday night who wants to, I want my steak cut in half. I want this half cooked mid-rare, that one well done. I want my potato cut in half, this half with this and the other half with that. We want half asparagus and half green beans. And then we're going to split our side salad. The chefs are already trying to put out, most nights were like a $25,000 night for us, meaning that we're pumping out about $7,000 to $8,000 of food every hour for 5 straight hours.
Wow.
So we're really hustling food into that window. And our goal is 12 minutes or less. Friday nights we kind of dabble into that 18-minute mark. But typically speaking, other than a well done steak, I created menus that were about 12 minutes or less.
Hmm.
And then you just get that one person in there and they just super modified it. The cooks they're so used to fast pace and now they got to stop what they're doing
Right.
and look down at this ticket. And sometimes it's so whack that it's like it's calligraphy or, it's like Chinese. Like, I don't know what this means. And so then I got to find the server. And ultimately what it comes down to is it's not a big deal. What it really comes down to is it slows the service down for
Mm.
everybody else in the dining room.
Mm.
You're to take care of that order, you're almost sacrificing everyone else around you's experience. And that's what's frustrating for us. We're used to a certain pace. So I know when the appetizer goes out, I've got about 10 minutes. So I'm pre-firing my entrees and getting things going.
Hmm.
That way I know when the appetizer is done, my entrees are going to already be in the window ready to go. And you're just messing with that tempo when we're messing with that. And then again, we're affecting everyone around you. And that's always what I don't take a lot of pride in going out and telling customers that I'm not going to do that. I try to just educate them on why I can't do that right now. But if they hang around till after the rush and just have drinks and hang out, I'd be glad to make that for them.
Mm.
But right now it's 7:30 on a Friday night. I can't do that for
Yeah.
you. You got to cut me some slack.
How about the movement to the open kitchen? Where people's right there and they can see the cooks
Yeah.
cook and everything. Is that good for the cooks? I love it, but I'm a patron.
Um, it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've how many counters you've sat at, or one of the a fun thing that we like to do is chef's tables where we literally put a group, a table, literally in the middle of the kitchen.
Wow.
And I love those. So, you don't get anything on the menu. It's 10 courses
Huh.
of whatever the chef feels like making. I don't care what you
Oh,
like and don't like. I'm making you 10
that
dishes. You're
sounds
getting it from me.
sounds great.
It's a lot of fun. But a lot of people don't understand how kitchens work, and
Hmm.
particularly the humor and the language that goes on in a
Ah,
kitchen.
see.
I like to say that I'm good, and, like, I don't the only place I promise you that I say bad words are in a kitchen, and 99% of the time, it's not for anything bad.
Right.
We're just talking, we're shooting off the breeze, and we're just talking smack about each other, and that's just kind of how chefs work. We're just kind of a bunch of sailors put together, and, there's so a lot of people have that disconnect on that language that kind of goes on with that. We try, of course, to be like, hey guys, there's people here. We don't sit anyone. My last restaurant, Estelle, we didn't put people at the kitchen or the chef's counter unless they specifically asked for it or they were a part of a chef's table. Outside of that, I try to keep people a little distance because, when the kitchen is open, and most of the kitchens I've been in have been open, there's just so much room for talk back and forth, and the cooks can get distracted. So I
Mm.
try to keep distance there and, keep my boys on track, make sure they're not, looking at the girl on table 13, you know, just letting chefs go down the rabbit hole. We try to
Sure.
keep it a little bit of separation. And then when
Right.
we have that event, it's just always a fun time.
Well, they're human after all, and yeah, and Not only do you make this pivot to a different job and it's better for you and your family, but you start a podcast with your partner out of Atlanta, Dr. J, Brodacious, and it's really cool. You go back and forth, and you kind of have a spiritual slant. I love your 5 F's: faith, finance, family, fun, and freedom. You do a really good
Yes.
job with that, Jonathan.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very thankful that I get to podcast with my brother every week.
Yeah.
He's had 2 or 3 successful podcasts. I've had one really successful podcast called Food and Farm. It was about our homestead here.
Hmm.
And then when I went through, through that depression, I I wanted to explore more and learn new things. So really the beginnings of the podcast was a whole nother podcast name, excuse me, called my what was it? My happy podcast or something like that. And it really was just a bunch of therapy sessions for me. I didn't want to pay to go to therapy or do all this stuff. So I
Right.
would just have guests on who would help me in my life.
Good
And
for
I
you.
talked to everyone from a relationship, an intimacy expert, Susan Blanton, all the way to one of my favorites was Renee Cavallari. She's the author of Head Trash.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed having her on. And it was really about me kind of exploring who I was. And then it just kind of led up to my brother was working on his, and it was very similar. And then I don't know, it was kind of like Batman and Robin coming
Mm.
together. We just gel really well together.
Yeah, you kept saying brother during the podcast. I wasn't sure if you were being figurative or literal, but now I get it. It's your
Yeah,
actual
no,
brother.
he is. We don't I guess we don't necessarily always say that on the
Yeah,
podcast, but he is. He's my biological older brother.
yeah.
He was my superhero when I was little. I've looked up to him. He's the best, man. He's been my best friend since I was born.
Hmm. And how did you arrive to the 5 F's, your 5 F's?
So, one of the things that we started talking to was, again, just in conversations, we were like, well, what's going to be important? What's important to us? Most importantly, before we talk about podcasting or anything else, what's most important to us? What makes us tick? And then we started talking it out, and it is the 5 F's that made things work. And then that's how we kind of molded it into the podcast. The podcast originally was just us two kind of just talking together and talking about our weeks and some different things we were going through. And we'd have a guest or two on, but we really started molding and changing things over to this 5 F's format. And what it really comes down to is, there's only, I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an
An
F
F.
Word. I
Yeah,
won't
you
say it on your
mentioned this.
podcast.
Yeah,
And,
you could
it could be quite an offensive book if
mm,
you're not ready for
sure,
that language.
sure.
But it is a book that I read, I mean, immediately when I was going through that. And basically, the premise of that book is you've only got so many F's to give.
Right.
There's so many things going on in your life. You're constantly getting bombarded on Instagram and Facebook and CNN, Fox News. There's all these F's that are out there in the world, and they're constantly bombarding your mind. At the end of the day, if you could only take with one hand
Mm.
and pick out 5 of those items, what are the 5 items that actually matter in life? And that's what we're going to focus on our podcast.
And that's it. Faith, finance, family, fun, and freedom. Faith is
Yes.
certainly a large part when you talk to your brother. I could sense it. You work with with the church, and it's important in your life. Finance, certainly, you talked about it. And sacrificing the big job for your happiness and your family. Family comes next. Fun and freedom. I wonder how. Talk to me about freedom specifically.
So when we talk about freedom, obviously we're not just talking about good old America.
Right.
We're talking about the freedoms from the things that might hold you back.
Mm.
And maybe maybe through you're going through a depression, maybe like many like myself and others that are in the restaurant industry, maybe you're going through, I went through an addiction in my early
That's
20s,
right.
or maybe you're just, you can't imagine getting up the next day.
Mm.
And a lot of that is discussion is about breaking those chains and finding what's going to make you happy. We hold ourselves back too much because we try to hold ourselves sometimes to this crazy high standard that we see on Instagram and Facebook and
Mm.
all those different worlds. We see the success of Elon Musk, and it's like, I got off the sofa today, you know? So we our brains naturally try to compare ourselves to people that we see around us and the success that others around. And we often miss that what we see on Instagram is less than 1%
Mm.
of the actuality of what happens. I'm really into homesteading, and I love to watch homesteaders on YouTube. I'm addicted to several channels that are on there.
Hmm.
And I had a chance to meet with one of them just real quick, just passing through. I happened just to run into him. And one of the things I asked about is like, you guys are doing so much. And you have so much success. You've got over 200,000 subscribers. And, how are you doing all this? It's like, you missed out on the 3 years of just absolutely failing at it. He says, for every episode I post, I probably trash four.
Hmm.
He says, what you're seeing is really only the tip of the iceberg of what's actually happening. And I think that happens a lot. A lot of people talk about Elon Musk, and people don't understand. Yes, Elon Musk is, if not the one of the most, richest men in the world, but he's also has had an infinite number of failures.
Yeah.
He fails in probably triple the amount of things that he has success in.
Right.
And we have to keep that in perspective of in our own lives is, yes, we're going to have success, but we also got to fight through, those hardships and break those chains and have mental freedom to be able to enjoy these other items.
Hmm. And you had one specific podcast that I really enjoyed, where you talked about the power of the word "yet," where you were
Yes.
it's pretty recent, and I'm not there yet. This particular goal isn't there yet, and it just talks about not procrastinating, but setting a goal.
Yes. So again, it comes down to it's okay that you are not in a place that you want to be.
Hmm.
I think almost everybody's in that boat. Nobody's sitting there being like, oh, well, I'm just completely happy with life and I never want it to change for the next 100 years. That's not the human experience.
Right.
We constantly want to be working on different things. And again, when we're getting into that cross comparison of our life to someone around us, maybe it's your best friend who's now got this big house and they have this, you know, wife who's 10 years younger than him and whatever it might be. You might have this unrealistic, conversation going on. The power of yet comes down to is I have not achieved something yet
Hmm.
instead of I have not achieved, how do I say this? I'll use an example for YouTube. I have not gotten 200,000 subscribers yet,
Yet. Yeah.
but I'm going to do X. So what the yet and y'all, the yet is not an excuse. I'm not haven't done it yet. So I'm going to put it on to some timeline, some procrastination timeline that I'm never going to get to. The point is that there's a yet, but it's also followed by a but with action.
Hmm.
What am I going to do that is going to get me into that situation? For Dr. J, he is in this real estate investment program.
Right.
And he's really excited about it. He's super passionate about it. He's got me hyped on it. I'm still about 2 or 3 years out before I can kind of jump on that train as well. And he's trying to figure out his money. So money's obviously to be able to buy homes and flip homes, you need lots of money. It takes at least $20,000-$30,000 for down payments, not to mention the costs associated with renting out and doing all of that. So he's trying to figure, he just like, I do not have the money yet, but I'm going to save money by eliminating my $7 Starbucks that I drink
Hmm.
7 days a week. I'm going to eliminate going to he likes to get a particular type of he likes to have a nice beer. So he's gonna like, well, I'm gonna sacrifice that beer. I'm gonna sacrifice a couple things so I can have this. And again, it's about making just 1% better each day.
Right.
It's not about people think that you got to have this giant change and all these things are going to happen. A lot of it is about just being 1% better each and every day.
Hmm.
And that's really what yet can be for you. It's yet, but each day I'm going to do X.
Hmm.
I'm going to schedule more time with my family. I'm going to save money by not going to Starbucks. For me, it's Chick-fil-A. I have a Chick-fil-A on my route to work. I can eat Chick-fil-A 7 days a week if they had opened up on
Yeah,
Sundays.
they don't. Yeah.
And I just the sweet tea, absolutely out of this world. Fried chicken biscuit, come on. And I could literally eat there every single day. But I saved $12 a day that I was spending on my breakfast that now I'm getting to spend towards time with my kids. We went
Mm.
on a trip this past weekend and went down to the Mississippi Gulf Coast and enjoyed a weekend on the coast. And again, I got that experience because I was being fruitful with my yets.
Right. On the podcast, we talk a lot about discipline. So I lost a bunch of weight a long time ago. I started a business tech. I'm in the tech industry, and I gained a bunch of weight. Doctor said, if you don't lose it, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. So that was all I needed to hear, and I just turned it around. And people ask me, how'd you lose all the weight? Like there's some magic bullet, and I just say discipline, and focus. I wonder how
Right.
discipline plays a role in your life, Jonathan.
So it does. I've been kind of going through that same weight loss. I don't like to say diets. Diets make me absolutely cringe.
Yeah.
I say an eating plan and our lifestyle plan. For me, that just works a little bit better. Discipline for me, again, it comes down to those I've not achieved something yet, but I'm going
Mm.
to do A, B, and C. And it's if I'm being fruitful in it, I know that I'm going to see something on the other side. I'm starting to see those benefits.
Hmm.
I've lost about 40 pounds over the last 8 months.
Congratulations.
I was at about 300, I think I was 340 pounds. I'm now down to 285. So it's just a constant if I'm constantly being fruitful, and yes, I might not always be perfect. Every once in a while I'll sneak something in or I try to take care of myself, treat myself because if I'm doing all this hard work, excuse me, if I'm being doing all this hard work, but I'm not treating myself and I'm not enjoying my life, then what's the purpose of it?
Mm.
But I'm seeing a benefit. I feel better. When I wake up, I pop up a little bit faster. I have gout, and kind of that problem with being a chef is I eat lots of rich foods all day.
Right.
The chef's office is almost right beside the soda machine.
Huh.
So that's another way that I might end up indulging in something that I shouldn't be indulging in. And I just feel better when I'm being disciplined on it. And the
Mm.
big thing that I've been fighting my discipline on is, am I working out or at least going for a walk, being active, doing something? It doesn't always have to be a walk or a jog or
Mm.
lifting weights. It can be something active. I do lots of active things on the farm. It kind of, if you've ever had to lift 50 hay bales and go pick those up and then bring them back to the farm, stack them up, trust me, you understand that workout.
Mm.
And just finding different ways to be active and not be too sedentary.
Hmm. Yeah, at my highest, I was 340, Jonathan. So keep at it. I wonder. So going through culinary school and working your way up in your last job, was discipline ever viewed as a strong point, in kind of as one of your skills? Did you ever look at it that way?
I didn't in a lot of ways. I felt the previous job that I had, I felt like it brought me to a highest level of
It
discipline
did.
because I had to be disciplined as far as like being the chef part of what I was doing. I was very disciplined.
Hmm.
Everything was very rigid. I had a very specific structure how I wanted things to be done. I had checklists and I know if I stayed to my checklist, I was going to get done at a specific time. Everything was going to be happy. And if I stuck to that regiment, I knew everything could work.
Hmm.
Now, the problem is on the backside is I wasn't being disciplined in my own personal life. And I
Ah.
think that's where I failed myself is that I was going to that soda machine way too often. It's very easy. Excuse me. Instead of eating a salad at lunch, it was very easy to go up and make a hamburger,
Right.
some French fries. And so what started out as me probably, I think when I arrived there, I was probably 300. It was very easy for me to climb up to 340 pounds
Wow.
because I was eating like an absolute slob because
Hmm.
I didn't care. Especially once you get far into it, you're just going through the motions. You're a mindless zombie
Right.
at a certain point. You do 6 months of that kind of schedule, you just start checking out on what's reality and what's
Mm.
real world.
Mm.
You're just going through the motions. So again, in my business world, very disciplined. Outside of that, in my own personal life, not so much.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm the same way. There's some things that I'm very disciplined at, and there's some things I'm not. And I get a lot of pushback, Jonathan. It's like, discipline isn't as important as passion or compassion or empathy.
For
And
sure.
I agree with that. I don't mean to profess that I am king discipline. It's just something that I use to lose a lot of weight. And I use it occasionally in some other things. So I just wonder how it is with others. And this is why I kind of keep a thread with my conversations and bring discipline into it. What motivates you, Jonathan Boyd?
Ultimately, my 5 F's. I mean, I
Mm,
start with my faith, and why we always say faith first is because to make the other four things applicable, you have to have some kind of moral compass
hmm,
that keeps those things in check.
hmm,
You know, faith, and it might not necessarily be a Christian faith, but some type of morality has to hold everything together, or else your version of freedom might be, you know, taking Oxycontin
hmm,
and drinking beers and playing video games all day. That might be freedom to you. But if you don't have the moral compass as to what freedom looks like from whether a faith perspective or personal, then none of the other things make sense. So I always kind of start there. And then again, I work up through my 5 F's. And those are my things that motivate me. And ultimately, especially my family, trying to get my time back with my family. My oldest daughter went to college last year and it absolutely just gutted my soul.
uh,
The fact that, she went to college before I could before I could, make changes and spend time with her. And now granted, she went to college 2 years early.
wow,
She went to college at 16,
wow.
but I still missed out on all of those things. And when she went to school, and I wasn't even there to really help her move in, to help, do all those things that dads are supposed to do
Mm,
when their daughter goes to college. So a lot of, my changes have been about my family, making sure that I'm getting time with them. Today I got to go to a soccer game and enjoy a soccer game.
awesome.
I made sure I wasn't a coach this year, which I've done in the past. I just wanted to focus on being a dad. I got a
Mm,
lot of projects and things going on. My wife gave me the freebie that I could just stay home and work on this home renovation project. And I was like, no, the whole reason I left that job is to make sure I never miss a soccer game again.
mm,
So I just make it a point now. And then again, it goes up to finance, making sure that I'm being disciplined in my finance, and of course, fun and freedom.
hmm. Is freedom just another word for nothing left to lose? That's a lyric from Janis Joplin.
I've heard that. Have I heard that before?
But me and Bobby McGee, when I was doing some research up from you, I just found myself singing that when I kept hearing the word freedom. How do you measure success, Jonathan?
So I'm going to measure my success by ultimately when it's my time to be put in a coffin or put underneath that slab.
Hmm,
My measure of how I'm going to measure my success is what I leave behind ultimately, because it's more than a dollar bill, it's more than a big house. It's what did I leave with the people who are around me?
hmm,
How are my kids going to be when I'm gone? How are they going to be young, fruitful men and women? Have I left the people, my friends? Did I leave a positive, a positive legacy with those people around me to where they're like, where they're going to be like, hey, you know what? I want to be like that when I leave. Because that's, and I leave this with like, my grandfather was that person for me.
hmm,
My grandfather passed a couple years ago, and it was just absolutely heartbreaking. I wasn't necessarily like super best friends with my grandfather. I loved him dearly, but my grandfather, he was just that kind, gentle soul who he never spoke negatively about anything.
hmm,
He never complained. He was just a doer. If something had to be done, he just did it. But he just never complained that he just went through his day. And then we're sitting post funeral and I'm listening to all of his achievements being, talked to from his colleagues and the people that he's helped. And he was a pastor, so people that he's brought to the faith. And you're just like, wow, man. Now, my grandfather brought in so much positivity, so much love, and he wasn't that person to just bring you in for a big old bear hug. He showed you love by action.
Hmm.
He would help a farmer by going out and helping him with his crop, help an old lady build a ramp for her house after she's been paralyzed from the waist down. And even at 70 years old, he was still doing it until
Wow.
he literally fell on the job, trying to help someone. And that was him being injured on that job is what ended up leading to his passing away a few months later.
Hmm.
But he literally got injured doing what he basically leaving his legacy behind and what he felt was most important. He knew that he always told me that being Christian is not an adjective. Being Christian is a verb.
Hmm.
And he was always really good about making sure that him and his faith was a verb. It was never an adjective to describe him. It was a verb and a lifestyle that he showed.
Well, that's wonderful sentiment. Being Christian is a verb. Jonathan, I love your story. The idea that in depression, in this toxic job that you had, you're able to turn it around and do it the right way. Find something else. I can find inspiration in that, and I hope others can as well. I love talking to you. How can people get in touch with you, Jonathan?
So you can find us on abrodaciouslife.com. And there you'll be able to find some great resources. You can learn more about myself and Dr. J. You can listen to the podcast there. Of course, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, all the big podcast sites. And we're also on YouTube. So not everyone listens through podcasts and
Yeah.
listens to content that way. I'm kind of the same thing. I listen to YouTube a good bit. So a lot of our content is crossed product over to YouTube.
Yeah.
So you can find us there on YouTube at A Brodacious Life. And we've got some great new content that we're working on, some cooking videos and some things we got in the works just to have fun to add in with that. And then if you ever need a resource, we have a great free resource for those who don't have a journal or something that they write down those goals and those things are important to you. If you subscribe to our newsletter there at abrodaciouslife.com, you can get a free newsletter, and in that is a free journal download. And you could just sync that over to your iPad or print it, and you can write it up. And I write in my journal every single day, and it keeps me disciplined and it keeps me on track.
Yeah, journaling is really, really important. And abrodacious for everyone, ABRODACIOUSLIFE. We'll make sure to put it in the show notes as well. Jonathan Boyd, thank you so much for your time. If and when I make it to Jackson, Mississippi, I hope we can have a steak. I'll buy the steak and you
Sure,
cook.
man. You betcha, man. Come on down to the farm. We'll have a blast.
I would absolutely love it. Thanks so much for your time, and you be well.
Thank you. You do the same. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.